should cheers.
We should, yeah.
We should cheers our water. Cheers the podcast.
Yeah. Welcome back to another episode of the Wave Running Podcast. It's been a bit of a hiatus, but we are back and we are doing in-person interviews, which is really nice. So I'm here with Sophie Lane today.
Yeah.
It's awesome to have you. Please quickly introduce yourself, tell everyone what you're about.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's an honour to be on here. My first podcast as a guest, which is very exciting. For those of you that don't know, I also have a podcast called Stronger Stride. We've done about 100 episodes now, so it's nice to be on the other side of the microphone today. Day to day, I'm an exercise physiologist and a running coach, and I do some strength and conditioning as well. So my kind of 9 to 5 is surrounded with runners, which is really fun. I've run since I can remember. I don't really remember a time where I wasn't running. It's always been a really strong part of my life, and I really enjoy it. And enjoy the social side, I guess, more. I'm kind of less of a competitive runner and more just a social runner, I would describe myself as. So yeah, I guess that's me.
Yeah, awesome. Lot to unpack there, just because I've also listened to a lot of her podcasts, and it's been nice, and it kind of inspired me to start it as well, which I told you recently. Just because I've been following the podcast for a fair amount of time now, and in your recent episode, you actually talked about how you got into running, like specifically, and I heard you were talking about how you're running down the road and back and stuff, but yeah, quickly talk about that, like recap it.
Yeah, so I guess as a kid, like I was always relatively sporty, played soccer and other sports growing up. And I remember, I don't know why I particularly got excited about a cross-country race for school one year. I think it was year 3 or 4, so I would have been 8 or 9, I think. And I wanted to train for it. So I think it was 2 or 3 days before the event. Classic primary school age kid decides I want to do something, trains for something the day before and hopes for the best. So I lived on the Central Coast, and there was about a 1 kilometre run from my house to the main road. Basically ran as hard as I could to the main road and back. And when I got back, I remember, I'm probably exaggerating in my head, but what I imagine is like my whole family, all my neighbours, everyone on the street is standing there cheering for me. I collapsed at the finish line and think I've just ran like the furthest ever. And I think it must have been 2 kilometres all up. A few days later, did the cross country, went all right in it. And from there, I just had this love for running. I don't exactly remember what it was about it that drew me to it. I didn't have anyone in my family that ran. It was just kind of this thing that I just enjoyed. And I kept doing the sports, didn't really take the running super seriously, but was always kind of involved in the school events. And then I guess where it sort of took off in terms of my running, and I never really had any like fantastic success. I've never really been an elite runner, but I think where I got more involved in the running community side of things was with Lydia, so the co-host of the Strong Stride podcast. We both were at a run on the Central Coast, which is called 6 at 6. So it's a 6 kilometre run at 6 p.m. in Gosford. And it was during our HSC exam period. I think it was the day of the maths exam. So we were both there blowing off some steam. And we had gone to school together from year 7 to 10. Then Lydia had moved school, so we hadn't seen each other in a little while. And we were sort of chatting about running and what we were going to do for uni, what we were doing after school and all those kind of things. And somehow talking about a half marathon came up, which for both of us at the time was a huge distance, super daunting, could never imagine running that far. I think we'd both done a couple of 10k fun runs, a 12k, maybe 15, but the half marathon seemed enormous at the time. So we decided to train for it. I remember each Sunday, I think we started at 10k and we'd add a kilometre every Sunday, and each week we just kept saying like, this is the furthest we've run, this is crazy. We thought it was just like the most enormous thing, and we did the half marathon, and it was huge. I felt a similar feeling to when I did that first 2 kilometre run, crossing the finish line, laying on the grass. I still remember being in Hyde Park, laying on the grass, just thinking like, there's no way I could have taken another step. Like that was huge. So I think that's where it all sort of kicked off in terms of getting more involved with fun runs and things like that.
Yeah. Was that SMH half marathon?
Yes.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
and now it's known as the Hocko Runaway Half, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do that one day because it's always in that like May period, which is, I feel like the start of a lot of road races coming afterwards. So yeah, it's kind of a nice one that I want to do one day, which I haven't done yet. But yeah, you mentioned that you're good friends with Lydia, your co-host of the Strong Stride podcast. I'm curious how it all started, because I feel like podcasting is also a pretty big part of your life now, in a good way. I mean, I love podcasting myself as well, but how did it all start? When did it start as well?
Yeah, well, when we arranged this podcast today, I was trying to remember exactly the conversation or how it came about. So I was looking through on Facebook Messenger, you can search for a word on Facebook. And I searched podcast. Obviously, there were lots of words that came up. So I scrolled right to the top.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find the exact conversation because I think it was something we obviously had in person. But there were lots of messages back and forth talking about which microphone should we get and when should we start and who should we get on. And we were kind of joking around with quite a few number of guests saying, oh, one day we'll get these people on. But both of us thought, no way, we're never going to get any of those people on.
Have you got any of them on now?
Yeah, I think Hopper was one of them.
Yeah.
I think Paddy Mack was one of them. Some of our really early guests. We were just sort of playing around, throwing around some names. And for both of us as well, we weren't living in Sydney at the time. We weren't super involved with that running community. We were both on the Central Coast, had kind of our small social network that we'd run with, but we were nowhere near as involved in the running scene as we are now. So we didn't really know what we were in for. And I remember speaking about it and saying to Lydia that maybe we'll wait. Lydia was still studying. I think I'd just finished uni. We're well, let's just wait. We're new grads. We're still in uni. Let's wait until we're experts. We'll wait until we know everything and then we'll start. And obviously, as you leave uni and start working, you realise you're probably or definitely never going to know everything. So we thought that date of starting would just be this never-ending thing that we're going to talk about, and it's this pipe dream, but it's probably not going to ever happen. And then I think one day we were out on a run, as we did. We would often go to Budai National Park and go for these lovely trail runs. And we just sort of said, let's just do it. Let's just do one. Let's just record one. Maybe we'll just keep it for ourselves. We probably won't post it. We'll just do it and see what happens. And we did it, and it sort of just flowed, and it felt really natural. And we didn't have a microphone at the time. The audio quality was terrible. We didn't really have a structure. We weren't sure what we were talking about. But we really enjoyed it. We both came away from it feeling this real sense of energy and excitement, and we still get that feeling now. I don't know if you have the same, where you finish with a guest who you admire and you're really excited to talk to, and then you just come away from it and you're just buzzing, and it's almost like a post-run feeling of just this ultimate high and this excitement and energy. And we had that the first time we recorded, and we just put it up. I think it was January 1st, 2020 or something like that, and we put it up there, and I remember we both downloaded it, and we both listened to it on Spotify and Apple so we could get 4 downloads, and we were tracking the downloads every day, and we'd get one and then another one, and it was a really sort of slow progression from there. But I guess that's all how it started, and we've just kept it up since then. So it's been nearly 3 years, and really loving it. Yeah,
that's so cool. I can relate with a lot of what you said there. When you first get it up, it's kind of scary, but at the same time, I was contemplating whether to start a podcast or not for a while as well. I just thought I'd dive into the deep end because that's what I did with my YouTube as well. I didn't know what I was doing when I started, but I knew that getting kind of the reps in will naturally make you improve every episode anyway. So, I feel like the best time to start is usually now.
Exactly.
Well, the best actual time to start was probably ages ago.
Yep.
But the second best time is always now.
Yeah, for sure.
And, I'm glad you started, and I'm glad I started as well.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I was refreshing my Anchor as well for the first week because I was so excited to see how well it would do and stuff. But I'm glad I had the community around me to kind of help me out as well. And just like you said, there's a lot of guests that I had in mind that I thought I'd never get on. And I'm only 10, 11 episodes in, and I've already gotten some cool people that I didn't think I could get on. So it kind of shows you how nice and open the Sydney running community is, because I feel like a lot of people are quite friendly and they want to help you out and stuff. So
I feel like there's not much of a hierarchy. I don't think, obviously there are faster runners and slower runners, but it doesn't seem as though the faster runners are necessarily better than the slower runners, or the people who are a bit more established are better than those that aren't or have more followers or whatever it is. I think everyone's kind of willing to chat about it. I think because if you run and if it's something that you're really involved in, you've got to have some level of passion, and if you're passionate about it, you're probably pretty keen to talk about it. So we found that everyone that we've reached out to has been super excited, I think, because just they want to spread the word, they want to talk about running, and they really enjoy it. So it's really cool to have people who you could be quite daunted or nervous to ask jump on straight away. So it's exciting.
I feel like you also filled a bit of a hole in the market, because I feel like there are podcasts maybe in other states with big names For the Kudos and whatnot, but I feel like in New South Wales and Sydney there's not as many, so it's good to see some small ones popping up now. But you're kind of leading the trail in a sense for New South Wales, which is so cool.
It's an interesting space to be in as well. I think particularly because both of us are female, and we definitely don't focus on that as our thing. We could probably go really heavy and promoting female health issues, promoting female training, and having that really kind of dominate that space, because there isn't really a lot of podcasts focused on that space in the running world anyway. And if you kind of scroll through the top charts of running, it's very male dominated. And we kind of fell into the trap in our early days of having pretty much 90% of our guests as males, and it wasn't intentional, it kind of just happened. But I think a lot of the people, if you kind of look at the people within the space who are, whether they're coaches or physios or athletes, a lot of the ones at the top just happen to be men, and it wasn't really a conscious thought, but we're trying to, I guess, provide the space for women to feel included in that. And especially it's really nice to see in the Sydney running community a space for women to come and run, because there can be some safety issues with women running in their own. And it's not something we talk about a lot, but it's something that I've really noticed as there's more and more groups popping up, is allowing people who normally would be too frightened to go out on their own. I know when we started Crow's Nest Run Club recently, quite a few comments from ladies saying, there's no way I'd run at this time of night on my own. I just wouldn't even think about it. But allowing that space for those people as well. So I think that's been really cool, and we're seeing a lot more diversity through that world as well, which is nice.
Yeah, and speaking of like more people having better access into running nowadays, like you're obviously a big part of that as well, because you are a running coach.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about your really complicated, but also not complicated if we explain it properly.
Yeah.
Like work life, because you obviously have like a day job, and then you also do running coaching as well. But explain kind of the structure of your work in a week.
Yeah, I guess for those that know me know that I struggle to explain. You know, and you have small talk and someone goes, what do you do? And someone might say, I'm an accountant. And I feel like I don't have that same one-word answer.
It's a long story.
It's a long story, but basically I studied exercise physiology at uni, and after uni went straight to exercise physiology, which is basically, for those that don't know, chronic disease and chronic injury management. So we have people with cancer, diabetes, hypertension, all sorts of chronic conditions, and we use exercise to treat or manage those conditions. And that was super rewarding. I really enjoyed that space. I was in that world for kind of 2 years or so. And throughout that whole time, obviously I was running on the side. I'd started the podcast, and that kind of running world was really sort of taking off on the side, not through my normal work. And I started to think, surely there's a way that I could combine the two. I really was more and more passionate about running, more and more involved in it, and started to find myself during my regular job, you know, if I had a cancellation, I'd be researching facts about running or lactate threshold or any kind of research topics around that area. And I felt like I could do some work in that space. But where I was living in Newcastle, there wasn't really an opportunity that I could see for that. So a job popped up in Sydney at the Sydney Performance Lab and North Shore Running. So there's a running club where I coach some interval sessions or tempo sessions, hills, trail runs, all those kind of things. And then as well, the Sydney Performance Lab is where I do some strength and conditioning for mostly endurance athletes or runners. We get some general healthy population people who just want to be strong for general life. But majority of my focus there is on strength training for runners. And as well as that, we do our lactate and VO2 max testing. So it's a really enjoyable kind of combination of all those different things. And I feel really lucky to be able to spend majority of my day with runners and endurance athletes and get to kind of see it from start to finish. So we can do baseline testing for those runners who are really, really into their running and want to know all the numbers and their metrics, and that's super interesting. But we also do things like beginners running programs for those who have never run before, and we take them onto 5Ks in 8 weeks, which is a really kind of rewarding process. So I guess that kind of encapsulates most of what I do, and I really enjoy the variety of it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's nice that, like you said, a lot of it ties, or even most of it, or all of it now, ties with running. Because, yeah, obviously you're quite into your running. So, yeah, I like how, you know, my job is also quite related to running, or very related. And, yeah, it just feels like you're only doing stuff that you kind of want to do, which is pretty fun. Yeah. And you talked about how you do some beginner running coaching. This is something that I'm not very familiar with, because you know, when I went on your podcast, I talked to you about how the way I got into running was, you know, I played soccer, but then like people around me were getting quite big, whereas I wasn't growing as fast as them, and then I felt like endurance running would be my best bet. But yeah, I'm just curious to know like some of your training philosophies for beginners, and like what do you think the main important thing is for beginner runners to focus on at the start? Because yeah, I don't know if it's like mileage or intensity or just literally enjoying it. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think
Yeah.
a lot of us runners probably don't really know the answer to that because we probably run forever. Like similar for me, I don't really remember. There wasn't really a time in my life where I was like, okay, I'm going to start running. It was kind of just always there in the background. I think that's probably quite common for a lot of the listeners. They've probably been running through high school or gotten into it maybe in their 20s and they don't really remember what it's like to not be able to run. So I think firstly, if you are kind of coaching that space, trying to find a way to sympathize or relate to the people who are starting out because it's super daunting. There's a lot of fear around it. I think running can be, obviously when you're in it is super enjoyable, but when you're on the outside and you're in the experience with running, maybe you've tried it before and you go for a run and you get out of breath and you feel like your heart's racing and everything's hurting and burning and that's kind of your association with it. Obviously that's not very comfortable, that's not very enjoyable, and there's probably a lot of fear around that, but there's a surprising amount of people who haven't run before who really want to, and it's kind of like a bucket list for a lot of people. Maybe they've done the corporate thing, maybe they've had kids, got married, and they're in their 40s and have just realized they haven't really ever done anything for themselves. So because of the accessibility of running, like as we know, just put your shoes on and go out of the door. There's not a lot of equipment required until you get really into it and you want 20 pairs of shoes.
Yeah.
But just getting started, it's really accessible. So I think for a lot of people, especially if they're busy, they know that if they can just learn how to be able to run for 30 minutes comfortably, then that's quite life-changing for them and it can be quite empowering. So I think understanding how they can be feeling when they're starting is really important at trying to relate to that and trying not to, brush it off. I think for a lot of us, a 30-minute run we just wouldn't even think about, but for these people, it's a huge undertaking. So I think my advice for anyone who's getting into it is start really, really slow. I think it's super common for us to just run as fast as we can. If we have no memory or idea of how to run, our only thought would be, when we're a kid running around the playground, and that's obviously we just run as fast as we can. If we're playing tip, chasing a friend, you just run as fast as you can. If that's your only association with running, you're going to step out the door and run as fast as you can, and that's not going to last very long, right? Maybe a minute or two, and then you're out of breath and you hate it. So my advice is always go for a walk and then just move a little bit faster than your walking pace. Like literally just jog a little bit more than whatever you would be walking at, and try that for a minute, have a minute rest, and do that a couple of times. I think we can really get carried away, and especially kind of our end of running where we're more into, I guess, the endurance space or doing more, maybe we're into ultras, marathons, that kind of thing. It's really easy to get caught up in the numbers and get carried away with wanting more and more. But I think for beginner, just start small, start slow. Don't worry about pace or kilometers or anything like that. Just focus on duration and try and increase that duration of those running sections and decrease the resting sections, I think is where I'd start.
Yeah. Like, I'm in this sort of social bubble where, like, I do have friends that want to get into running, but they all are coming from, like, a different sport, so they're not, like, completely new to sports, I guess you can say. So, like, sure, they're not super duper fit, but I try to make them I take them to places with good views so that we can take our mind off, like, how fast we're going and just enjoy the views a little more. But, yeah, it's cool that you do, like, real beginner coaching because there's, like, again, a hole in the market that you're kind of filling in a sense because a lot of people, when they think of running coaching, or maybe there's a bias because of the people that I know, coach, more like elite runners and junior elites and stuff like that. But I feel like, you're filling in a hole in the market where you're kind of helping out the beginners take their first few steps and getting them to like a 5K or being able to run 30 minutes and stuff, which is really awesome. But do you have any like cool stories of any athletes that have made some good progress?
Yeah, I think for most of them, I think, as I said, the running is quite life-changing. And a lot of people will come to me and I think I've got to give credit to Claire and Andy from North Shore Running because they've been doing this for much longer than me. But we get runners coming in and you can tell that they're really lacking confidence. They're really lacking any kind of self-esteem or feeling that they're actually capable of doing anything. And they're so daunted by the thought of running for a minute, let alone 5Ks in 8 weeks. So I think for a lot of them, when they realize they can actually do that, it's quite life-changing and quite empowering for them. So anyone who's been through that process of starting from scratch and sticking with it and persisting with it, I'm just inspired by all the time. But I've got a particular runner at the moment who's doing Sydney Marathon next weekend. And I remember when we started probably 16 weeks ago, the thought of running a marathon was just like, unfathomable, just some kind of idea that she thought maybe one day, you know, similar to when we started the podcast, you know, we'll do it one day, and kept putting it off, and we just said, like, let's just go for it. And again, every run that she's been doing on a Sunday has been longer and longer, and it's this really cool process of watching someone who just had no self-belief to suddenly just do the things that she said she couldn't do. And the race hasn't even happened yet, and I think that's something I really like about kind of the more beginner runner journey, is it's less about the times and the splits. We're not looking at, you know, what kind of paces is she running. It's just about, can you actually do it? So I think for those types of people, the journey, it sounds really cliche, but the journey leading up to the race is way more powerful than the day. Like, we know that she's going to do it, and that's going to be fine. But the fact that she's stuck with it for this amount of time and has progressed so well and been really patient and kind of surprised herself throughout each week, like, I wouldn't even care if she just said, no, I don't actually want to do the marathon, because all the work's already been done. Like, that's where the hard work happens. The day is just a really fun celebration to show that you've done it. But I think, those sort of stories really keep me motivated and inspired.
Yeah, that's such a good way to put it. And I also enjoyed, like, your podcast episode with the slow coach as well. I think, I listened to that quite a while ago, but I remember being quite inspired, because it's such a different perspective, especially maybe to some of the listeners on my podcast that are probably more further into their running journey, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like a real eye opener, and really cool to see. And yeah, you're right. Like, I feel like the journey matters a lot more, because it's already such a big effort to get to the marathon start line.
Yeah.
Healthy and fit. So, you know, the fact that you can put together training for that long, and get there is pretty cool. Yeah. On another note, though, you're doing the Sydney Marathon as well, right?
I am.
What, jogging it?
Yes. So look, I bought a ticket for it ages ago when all the hype was building and everyone was getting really excited, and I just thought, like, I'll just do that as kind of just a training run, and I'll just participate, and it will just be a really fun day. And then I think maybe a few weeks after that I hurt my hamstring, and it's just been this slow process getting back from that. So I probably am still doing it with the same frame of mind as I was when I signed up, but just with a way different process leading up to it. It was never really an A race. It was never really a focus for me. I'm not super into my road racing, more of a trail runner when it comes to events. But this was just something I felt like I couldn't miss out on. I feel like I'm involved in the Sydney running community in so many ways, and to miss this would just be such a shame. So yes, I will be there on the start line, hopefully on the finish line as well. But yeah, I'm just going to take it all in, enjoy it, hopefully share a few Ks with some people. I think it's going to be a really cool day.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be part of the numbers as well, because obviously Sydney Marathon is trying to become a world major. More info on that on the James Constantine episode. He's part of, like, the organising committee for that, so he has a big role to play in that. But yeah, I think it'll be an awesome day. I kind of want to just add on to the numbers, make a video. I still haven't decided what I'm going to do exactly, because I'm a little unfit as well right now, coming back from injury. But
were you going to wear a costume or something?
I was, but I'm starting to feel like maybe it'll be nicer if I can pay someone, or because I don't know, I want to see if I can help someone out with a goal. I got a few people in mind, but haven't really decided on who exactly yet. But yeah, I think I'll pay something between 3:20 or 3 hours.
Wow. Okay.
So someone going in that range, because I feel like I can do that still, but I'm not really in shape to do what I've been hoping to do. But it's fine, because injuries I feel like are part of the sport now. Like, it's so common. I feel like I know so many people that are injured right now. I think even your co-host Lydia is having a bit of a rough time now as well, but I feel like she's enjoying swimming and the other stuff as well, though, which is nice.
I think you can't be a runner and not get injured. I don't know what the stats are, but it's something like 9 out of 10 runners get injured in the first year or something like that. And there's obviously strategies that we can use to kind of try and minimize that. Obviously, load management, trying not to do too much too soon, doing strength training, having good recovery practices, but it's just inevitable. Like, some of it is just luck. Some people are just way more prone to injuries than others for whatever reason. I've had my fair share, and it is pretty frustrating. So if you're listening right now and you're injured, it will get better.
We can relate.
Stick with it. Be patient. I think you learn. You learn a lot of lessons. And it really makes you appreciate the running when you can do it.
Yeah,
if
for
you
sure.
haven't been able to do it previously.
Yeah. Running's so fun, so I feel like, when it's your first year, you can get excited and do a lot more. I mean, I'm multiple years into my running and I still find it exciting every single day. Like, I love going out for runs. I get the same enjoyment now as when I first started. And yeah, I feel like that's the reason why I'm constantly kind of pushing that barrier between, just about to get injured and also getting injured kind of thing. But, yeah, well, I know you've had a fair share recently. Obviously, you had the hamstring.
Yeah.
And then you were inspired by the Matildas.
Yeah.
Which I don't blame you for.
Everyone. I was ready to sign up for the Matildas. I thought I can kick the ball around for a bit and I'll be straight into the team, but I don't think it's that easy.
Yeah. So what exactly happened then? I know you told me, but explain again.
Yeah. So I think it was around the time of the finals or whatever, and I used to play soccer as a kid and then gave it up for running because I would run a half marathon in the morning and then try and play soccer after, and it just never went well. So I just went and played a kick around, like 30, 40 minutes, shooting goals, like nothing too wild. And then I came home and just realised I couldn't move my foot. So if imagine yourself standing on the ground, trying to lift your toes up to your shin, I just couldn't do that action on my right foot. And it wasn't painful, it just felt restricted, it just physically wouldn't move. And I was sort of joking around that I was paralysed or it's not like something significant had happened, but I couldn't really work it out. And then the next day, did the long run at Naremburn. Adrian hopped in the car and told me lots of stories to keep me entertained on the drive. So I sort of got distracted by what was going on. Although driving was really difficult because lifting my foot up to move to the other pedal was really hard to do. So that was a bit weird, and I wasn't sure how I was going to run. But walking around was probably worse than running because I could land on my forefoot when I ran. But obviously when you walk, it's kind of heel to toe. So that was difficult. So did the 25Ks, felt a bit weird because my gait was just different. I think I probably tend to be more of a mid to rear foot striker. So I definitely had to change my gait, which is probably something that I would recommend to anyone. If you've got an injury, even if it doesn't hurt, but if it's making you change how you normally move, probably not worthwhile running because you're going to load up different structures to what you normally would, and could end up with a secondary injury because of that. So I sort of realised that halfway through, stupidly kept going, but felt okay. And then driving home I was in a lot of pain. I didn't tell Adrian because he was on this massive high from his longest run, and I was just like, yeah, really happy for you, but really in a lot of pain. So I spoke to podiatrist Blake Withers and Lydia as well, and they got me onto the anti-inflammatories, and that seemed to settle it down, and it's been okay since. So very relieved.
Yeah, I feel like that compensatory injury thing that you talked about is spot on because. Yeah, I'm literally in the same boat right now. I got shin splints maybe the end of July, and yeah, I had to build back up really slowly from that. And once I was building back up nicely, I realized that my gait was again different to normal. I'm like you, more like a midfoot or rear foot striker. Honestly, probably more of a rear foot striker or heel striker, but landing under my center mass. But then when I do faster running, so workouts and races, I'm a little more midfoot, forefoot. But yeah, majority of my running is obviously slow, easy jogs. So I'm used to landing on my heel. But I noticed that even in my easy jogs, I'm starting to land on my forefoot. And that was purely because I think I was subconsciously scared of getting shin splints again. Not that heel striking is a direct, causer of shin splints. But I feel like, landing on your forefoot and and changing your gait a little might take the load off that area a bit more, maybe. So I feel like I did that unintentionally, and then I got a forefoot injury now under my on the plantar side of my fourth and fifth metatarsal ish. So yeah, that's so spot on. You do have to be careful if you feel like you're running abnormally compared to normal.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the secondary injury can do even more harm than the first one. So yeah, that's one little tip for you guys. Right, so another thing I wanted to talk about was how a great runner, or your running ability.
Be careful with your words.
Sure, yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to talk about how running ability doesn't necessarily equate to how good you are at coaching, and I know we talked about this a little bit a few days ago, actually.
Yes.
Because obviously it's a spectrum. There's super good runners. There's, a bit of genetic component involved with some of that as well. And I feel like the people that have to start from scratch and kind of go through the whole, or like most of the process of, being a real beginner and building up kind of slowly, I feel like those people are more empathetic, because I feel like you're a pretty empathetic person, and, you're pretty good at communicating as well. So, can you talk a bit about how performance may not necessarily equate to running coaching?
Yes, 100%. This is something that I feel very passionately about, and it's something that put me off probably in the early days when I was still doing my clinical work, for getting into running coaching, and also something that I've found throughout kind of the podcast and coaching journey. I've felt this kind of imposter syndrome for a while, because I think often especially, in a lot of sports, like in team sports as well, often there's this narrative of a runner going through the ranks, or an athlete going through the ranks, getting really good at their sport, staying in that kind of level. Maybe they go to the Olympics or whatever it is, and then eventually they'll retire and go straight into running coaching. And they're often really kind of looked up to and praised. And obviously if someone is at that level, there's so much for us to learn from them, and so much that they can teach us as well. But I think we can also get a lot of value from those who haven't had that same success, or haven't maybe been as genetically gifted, or had as much talent, or potentially just been in a different environment to those people. And this really sort of put me off for a while, because I thought, okay, it's similar to the podcast, like when I'm a good runner, then I can become a good coach. When I hit these times, when I get these PBs, when I run this total distance, then I'll start coaching, because then I'll know what I'm talking about. But I just don't think that level exists. I think if you are someone who's thinking about getting into coaching, and maybe you don't feel as though you are the most successful athlete in your own right, I just don't think that's relevant. Obviously, there's an element to experience, and there's an element to being involved. And I think to be a coach, you've got to kind of enjoy the sport to some degree, to have the passion and the drive to want to help other people kind of get to where they want to go. But I don't think you have to have any kind of level of success or hit any number of times. And that's something I've learned as well from Andrea that we were speaking about earlier. She's in a similar situation where she feels this big imposter syndrome, and athletes will come to her and say, I want to train for a marathon, I want to run it in 3 hours. And she goes, well, I've never done that before. So how could I get you there? But I think we need to kind of remove that narrative, because you can know the science, you can know the art, you can know exactly what it takes to get there. Like for you, for example, I could know exactly what it takes to get you to your PBs. I can't do that necessarily. I might not be able to. Maybe eventually, if I quit my job and put all my focus into it, and I worked really, really hard, maybe I'd come close. But we're different people. We've got different genes. We've got different abilities. There's so much variety. But I could still know exactly how to help, and I could still have the same compassion and empathy and understanding and consideration that's required. I think there's this science element and there's this art element. I think the science is really helpful to have that background knowledge, to know what training zones you should be in, to know what kind of kilometers you should be in, to understand progressive overload. Those kind of things are really important. But then the art comes into it. You might have something stressful come up in your life, and we need to know, how can we adjust your training around that? How can we change things to make sure that you're not overdoing it if work's really busy or you've got family stresses at the moment? I think all of those things you can do without having done them yourself at such a high level. I think as long as you're passionate about the sport, as long as you have a good base level understanding, you've done your qualifications, you've gone through some courses, you're continuing to learn and develop your skills, going through CPD, reaching out to other coaches who are maybe more experienced. I don't see any issue with me coaching an Olympian or anyone at a similar level coaching someone who's way higher than them. I think there's so much more to coaching than actually being able to do the thing yourself.
Yeah, like you said, there's so much to it. And communication's a pretty big one as well, because you were talking about how there's other stressors in life that can affect the training, and if you as a coach are not able to be a good communicator and check in with the athlete on how they're feeling that week, not just in terms of running, but outside of that as well, then, you might be overloading them a little bit for what they're going through. And yeah, that's also why the athlete has to be pretty good at communicating with the coach too, but developing that coach and athlete relationship is also important. And, some people are better at that, some people aren't. And yeah, being a good athlete definitely doesn't equate to being a good communicator as well. So there's a whole load of factors into it. So yeah, it just kind of depends on too many things. Like most things in life as well.
Nothing's
so
black and white.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, you definitely raised a good point there.
Yeah, just on that with the communication, I think you raised a good point about it goes both ways. I think the most successful kind of coach-athlete relationships that I've had are the ones that communicate really clearly and frequently enough. Obviously, there's a limit. You don't want to be up all night chatting to your athletes and having questions all the time. But if you can kind of keep the coach in the loop of what's going on. So we use Training Peaks, a really common platform. You'll load your run and then you can add a comment to it. And I think there's so much more to know than just, okay, that person's done that workout, they've done that run, they've done these kilometers, but how did they actually feel on that? What else is going on in their life? Because there's so much more to running, and you could so easily just get a cookie cutter online template and follow that, and maybe that'll work for you. But if you've got anything else going on, it's so nice to have someone who can oversee that for you and be kind of unbiased. And I know that I'm guilty of this with my own training is, I'll choose the runs that I want to do. I'll do lots of social runs, and I'll do the strength exercises that I like, and I'll avoid the ones that I don't. So having someone kind of independently overlook that and be able to move things around, and you can say, hey, I've got a wedding this weekend, I'm not going to be able to do my long run, can we move it to Wednesday, and things like that. I think that's really, really part of the benefit of having a coach. I think it's so much more than just having someone tell you what to do. It's having that relationship where they can adapt and you can work through problems together and make the best outcome, I guess, together.
Yeah, like a lot of people say it's all about accountability, but yeah, I agree. I think it's also just having someone else to talk to see how you can work around the rest of your life as well, because everyone has a bit more going on than just running in their life. So it's better if you can talk with someone to adapt the training around your life. But yeah, talking more about run clubs, we both help out with the Crow's Nest Run Club at Pace Athletic.
Finally.
Have you been enjoying that so far?
I have absolutely been loving it. I can't remember when we first started speaking about it, but for those that don't know,
ages ago.
Yeah, Pace Athletic have run clubs for all their stores, but they didn't have one for Crow's Nest when I first moved here about 18 months ago. And I've spoken to Soda on and off about it, and we were going to get it organised, and then you moved overseas. Very rude. And we finally had it going for about 5 weeks now, and honestly, it's the highlight of my week. It's so much fun. We've somehow just created this really fantastic group of just really nice, friendly people, welcoming people that want to chat, have conversations. It's all very inclusive. Everyone wants to be there and help each other, and there's no real egos. And I've been really, really enjoying it. So thank you for helping me get that started.
Yeah, well, I mean, you did a lot of that work as well, so I appreciate it. I kind of just became the middleman, and let the boss know, and then it happened. So yeah, it's awesome. If you guys are ever free, you should definitely come join.
Yes.
Thursdays, we meet at around 6:15 p.m. at Pace Athletic Crow's Nest, and we start at 6:30. But yeah, it's such a wholesome group of people. Like, there's a good range of, even age and performance diversity, even just general nationality diversity as well. Yeah. So it's just a good group. I talked to a lot of the people there, and everyone's on different journeys. Like, I literally met someone who is trying to do a half marathon every single year, and she's in her 50s. So like, that's so cool to hear as well, because you don't know. Well, I personally don't know that many people in their 50s doing that every single year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just cool to see the different journeys that everyone's in running. Yeah,
I think it's been cool as well, because there's been quite a few people who've said that they haven't run with a group before, and I think for both of us, like, I don't know, 80%, well, probably all of your runs are with groups, and mine the same, which we're really blessed and lucky to have. But I think for those who haven't experienced that before, like, it is just game changing. Like, it really takes your running to a whole different level. You just enjoy it in such a different way. You can share the experiences with different people. You can struggle together and celebrate afterwards. And for anyone listening who doesn't currently run with a group, I'd really, really encourage you to reach out to anyone in your local area. There are just so many run clubs popping up all the time. And if there isn't one, I'd really encourage you to start one. I think obviously it can be really confronting, and you can put yourself out there, and maybe you'll turn up and no one else will for the first few weeks, but I think that's okay. And I think eventually, you'll get a couple of people, and it will really, I think, just boost the amount of enjoyment you get from your running. I think we're so lucky in Sydney with how many groups there are and the collaboration between them all. And I think that's really been on display leading up to Sydney Marathon. I think with the runs that they've been putting on a Sunday from James and Nick and Ben, and that's been really cool to see everyone sort of come together and kind of everyone's working towards the same thing for their own benefit, but with like-minded people, and getting to share that experience, I think makes it really, really enjoyable.
Yeah. Again, like I said on my podcast when I went on yours, like the more people that get into running, the better it is for everyone. Like everyone benefits from it. So yeah, it's just nice to see, like you said, all the clubs growing. And yeah, I want people to carry on as well. And you touched on an interesting point where you said, start your own run club. Because like, I totally agree with that, because you don't necessarily need like people you don't know to come to the club to call it like a run club. You can start with a little friend group and then slowly expand from there, because everyone in that small group to start with is going to know other people, and yeah, it's just eventually going to grow no matter what. So you don't need to know many people to start a club, I guess is my point. And how have the Sydney Marathon run clubs been? Because I've been trying to go to some of them, but I always have something else that pops up on the same day, and I just can't go to one. What are they like? Good.
I've been to maybe 4 or 5 of them, and it's been great. I've really enjoyed it. I think probably like each time I've enjoyed it a little bit more, because you know some more familiar faces, and you get kind of more comfortable with the group, and I've really enjoyed it. I think just there's something about, especially for the longer runs, when for me personally, haven't been feeling fantastic when I've been running lately. Sometimes in running everything feels good, sometimes it doesn't feel as good. So for me at the moment, it's been nice to kind of switch off, just follow whoever's in front of me, not have to think about the route, not have to think about the distance or the pace. You're just kind of in the flow of it, almost like it's kind of slipstream behind whoever's in front of you. And I've just been really enjoying having those Sunday long runs. I think that's something before these were on, I'd often, do a run with Lydia or a friend, but I probably haven't had like a regular group Sunday long run in a while, which I think would be something that would be really nice to keep going after these are over, because I think sharing those longer runs with a group is really nice, a nice way to get lots of mileage in, because I've done some solo runs before. When I was training for Bondi and Manly last year, I just wasn't very organised, and I think you were going to join for some, and I hadn't planned it, and I did this 50k solo training run, and like now looking back, I'm like, why was I doing that by myself? Like there were so many people I could have called on to join in just for a few k's. It would have made it way more enjoyable. But training for that on my own, I think I did a 30 and then a 50, maybe the week or two after. And I just remember, I think I was about 42, 43 k's in, and I stopped at the traffic lights and was waiting for it to go. And this lady came up to me. She was walking a dog. And she goes, "Oh, excuse me, you do know that you can jog on the spot while you wait for the traffic light?" And I nearly just lost it. I was like, you do not know how much I'm suffering right now. Like, I am enjoying every moment of this rest. Like, I don't want it to go green anytime soon. So I think, you really get to the depths. And it's a nice way to grow. It's a nice way to challenge yourself. You really do struggle, I think, when you're on your own going for that kind of long run. I learned a lot about myself. I definitely spent a lot of the last 10k's audio messaging Lydia to pretend like she was there, but I think for anyone who's doing those longer runs, doing it with people can really, really help.
I reckon my take on that is like, it's always nice to have long run company, but then like recovery runs you can do alone sometimes, because it's also nice to have that balance, like it's nice to all run with people all the time, but I'm also a little bit of an introvert at heart, so like I need that alone time sometimes to kind of reset and think about other stuff as well, because some of my best ideas come from my solo runs. So.
Absolutely, I agree. You can get so creative to it. Like sometimes I'll forget my headphones or just go without, and you just have all these ideas, and I'm constantly like recording little audio messages for myself to remember different ideas of podcast things or all sorts of things. So I definitely agree. I think as well, as much as we love run clubs and social runs, I think this is something we spoke about with Dan Price in our episode with him ages ago, was actually the danger of social runs, which sounds kind of negative and pessimistic, but it can be dangerous, because there might be a social run on a Monday morning and a Monday night and a Tuesday morning and a Tuesday lunchtime, and you want to go to all of them because they're all fun and you enjoy all of them, but it's really easy to overdo it. And especially something that I've noticed the last few months as I've had these niggles is you'll be going for a run and you're kind of in a bit of pain, and then you start chatting to someone and you have this conversation, and 10k's later you're like, oh, I feel fine, my leg's not hurting anymore. and then maybe that conversation stops, or they move on to someone else or whatever it is, and you're by yourself, and then you go, okay, actually no, I am in pain. So it can kind of mask whatever you're going through, which feels great at the time, but could potentially be risky, I think, long term. So I guess just trying to find that balance and not overdoing it. We know that overuse injuries are so common with running, so just kind of doing the things that you enjoy and spending that time with people and making the most of that, but still being quite sensible and wise with what you're choosing to do.
I think I have to listen to that episode because I think that's the thing I struggle with most. Honestly, there's so many clubs. I actually recently, because I made a new friend and I was trying to tell her all the running clubs that like I know exist during a week, and I just wrote down, Monday morning, Monday over, all the way down to Sunday, and the amount of clubs I came up with was ridiculous. And that's just what I know, and there's probably plenty that I don't know. Like, I mean, there's a few that I kind of know, like Coogee Run Club, which I didn't even include in that list. But yeah, it's just crazy to see how much it's grown. But yeah, it's so tempting to go to all of them. And yeah, I mean, again, it's all about balance. Like sometimes a lot of the run clubs are quite social and slow and chill though, which is actually a good thing because I end up just doubling but doing 2 short runs kind of thing now. And I'm just in the middle of enjoying running rather than trying to become a really fast 5K runner right now. I think I've kind of written off the rest of the year just because, it's been a slow year in terms of progression and, I've got injuries and stuff. So, I think sometimes it's good to reset. And, I feel like you don't hear that from everyone all the time, Like, and another interesting thing I realized recently, sorry, we're going on like a lot of tangents, but have you noticed that, like, because I think all of us aren't really good at always scrolling Strava and keeping up with everyone, because I guess we know a fair amount of people, but like, I feel so bad, but I didn't even realize that Lydia was injured until like I started talking to her, because I had something to talk to her about recently. And then I just checked Strava because I was curious, and I was like, oh wow, she actually hasn't run for a while. But can you relate with that? Like, it's hard to keep up with everyone, right?
For sure. I mean, it's so hard. I think you've got your kind of close circle that you keep on top of regularly, but the broader community, like, it's so hard to know what everyone's up to. And I really try to check in with those that I know. Like, if I notice, if I'm quick enough to notice something, I'll definitely send them a message, and I do try and follow up. What I'm really bad at is then following up again. So I'll go, hey, how you going? And they'll reply, and then I'll forget to reply. So really trying to keep on top of that, I think, is really beneficial.
I think you're good at that for the most part, from my perspective.
Okay, thank you. I try.
As soon as I'm like, I get a little emotional on my Strava or something, you're like straight into.
I appreciate your honesty on Strava. I feel like so many people hide how they're feeling, but you seem to be willing to just put it all out there for the whole world to read. And I really admire that, because I think it shows the reality. It shows the truth of what's actually going on. So many people just show the highlights. We know that from social media. We only show the good stuff. But I think showing that there are ups and downs, it's not all smooth sailing. I really respect that from you. So appreciate that. Yeah, I definitely want to always be pretty transparent, because I never want to give like an image where everything in my life is always going right, because it's definitely not the case. And I think the more open you can be and talk to your close friends about that sort of stuff, the better in the long run. But, I think I remember one day, I don't think there was anything particularly wrong, but I just had a run that just didn't feel very good. And I ended up recording a podcast straight after about it, because I was like, I've just got all these things to say that I haven't really thought about before. It was one of those runs where I had all these ideas. And I think I put a story up on Instagram just saying, like, it's just frustrating because you just want every run to feel good. And obviously there's injuries and things that disrupt that. But when everything's going right and then you have a run that just doesn't feel good, it's kind of like, well, why am I going through this? And I realized how many people related to that. Their response on that was crazy. All these other people saying similar things, and sometimes we just don't feel like it. And I think an issue with running and endurance sports compared to every other sport is we don't have an off season. Like, there's times in the year where there are more runs on. Around Christmas time, there's definitely less, and people might train less around that period, but there's no real periodized yearly structure where we've got an off season where maybe we're not running at all, or we're just doing a couple of easy runs. And then this pre-season where we start to ramp up, things start to progress a little bit, and then kind of our in-season where we're focusing on 2 or 3 races throughout a 6-month period. I think that concept, maybe not exactly in that structure, but that kind of concept is something we should all take on, and I'm really trying to get my head around. I personally, I don't know about you, but I really struggle to, like, the thought of taking a week off running, just not running at all,
it's scary
for no
to me.
reason. If you just said to me, like, just try it, like, I would really, really struggle. Obviously, if I had some serious injury and I couldn't run, or if I was like severely sick, or if I had a genuine reason, maybe. But if I was just doing it just for my longevity in the sport, or just to have my off-season period, I would really struggle with that.
Yeah.
And I challenge the listeners to think about that for themselves, because I think that's a bit of an issue. I think that, like, 1 week, it shouldn't really make much difference. But I think when it's such a part of your routine, and there's obviously good parts to that where it's so kind of ingrained in us, and it's such a habit that's fantastic. But to not be able to step away from that at all, I think personally, and I feel that is a bit of an issue. I don't know if you have similar thoughts.
100%. Like, yeah. I mean, the thought of, like, I feel like I'm further into that problem where the thought of even taking 2 days off in a row is, like, scary to me, which is not good. And I'm definitely trying to work on that, obviously. But yeah, I think because there's events and a lot of different fun events going on the whole year, basically, especially in Sydney, it's pretty hard to, not always be training for something, you know? So, I can definitely relate with that. But, yeah, I think once a year it's nice to just have a week off. Like, your body needs that reset,
I know,
for sure.
we should do it, but it's easier said than done.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I think if I were to take a week off, I'd want to replace it with at least hiking or something. Then I can kind of justify it. But I'm that far into the problem. So, yeah, it's a problem I have.
It's an interesting challenge, yeah.
Definitely, yeah. And, well, speaking of, actually, I feel like you touched this when you were introducing yourself at the start. But, yeah, you do a bit of road running, but you also do trail and a lot of different race formats. But do you think that kind of helps with longevity in the sport? Because I feel like you wouldn't get bored of it, would you? Because you do a bunch of different stuff. Yeah,
for sure. I think I've traditionally been someone who's very into events. I remember in year 10 we had to do, it's so silly now thinking about it, but we had to do like a social work subject where we had to do, I think, 100 hours of charity work or something like that. And I remember like Googling, trying to figure out how I could, because I was spending all this time running. I was like, how can I make this running time my charity time? Which now looking back on it is very selfish. But I ended up just signing up for all these fun runs that were linked to a charity. And then I'd raise money for the charity and do the run, which was very much just me having an excuse for my mum to take me to all these fun runs. I don't know, I did like one every couple of weeks for that whole year. So I think, yes, I've always been someone who tends to be involved in events. I just find them fun. I just enjoy the atmosphere. I enjoy the excitement of it. And I say that, and then still the night before or the morning of, regardless of what it is, I still feel nervous, and I still feel like, oh, why am I doing this? This is so silly. Like, I can just go on a run by myself. But yeah, there is something really exciting about those events. I have definitely lent more towards the trail side of things. Probably, I did UTA a couple of years ago, the 50, and I think just the training for that made me really, really want to do more trail running. And I think there's so much less pressure. As I've said before, I'm not really into the stats and the numbers and paces. I'm kind of just in there for the social and to enjoy it. So with trail running, you can go for a walk, you can have a picnic halfway through the run, you eat lots of food, you chat to people. It's very social, it's very much more relaxed. Obviously still at the top end, if you're trying to be competitive, you've got to be quite serious about it. But for me, middle of the pack, I'm kind of quite happy to just enjoy it and take each kilometre as it comes, whether that's walking or jogging or hiking or running. So I've enjoyed the trail running. I'm doing Tarawera next year. And I'm going to, after this marathon next week, I'm going to do my best to not sign up for anything until February next year. I might still do something just for fun, but I'm not going to kind of focus on anything. And I really want to spend the next 5 or 6 months focusing on one thing, because what I found in the past is I get really caught up in signing up for random things. I did High Rocks, which is this CrossFit competition a few weeks ago. The day before, so I did a surf. I've done all sorts of random things. Backyard ultras. I've done a virtual backyard ultra off no training, injured myself. Right. I don't know if you remember or if you were following when I did the 24-hour challenge when I was in lockdown, and I was just doing laps of my backyard.
No.
Okay, short little tangent for this.
Yeah.
It was during COVID. I lived with a housemate. She got COVID, and it was at the time where you had to have, I think, a week of isolation if you were in the same household. Yeah. So she moved, like she was staying somewhere else. I had the house to myself, didn't have COVID. And again, it was this issue of, oh no, I've got 7 days to be stuck in this house. And I think I was in the middle of training for something. And I was like, I can't, there's no way I can just do no running. And so we lived in this little townhouse in Newcastle, and I measured the distance of the backyard, and it was 17 metres long. There was about 5 metres of that, which was just footpath. And then there were 3 steps, which were kind of like you had to do a little bit of a turn to get up the steps, a little bit more footpath, and then this kind of like gravel for the last section.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, I'll do a couple of laps of that just to stretch the legs, get a bit of movement. Did a few laps, and it took me, I think, half an hour to do 3Ks, because 17 meters, like you're turning around so frequently, going up and down the stairs. Like by the time you start running, you're turning around again. So there's a lot of stop-start. And I remember just putting out on Instagram, like, hey, I just did 3Ks. What should I do? Like, should I do 10Ks? Should I do an hour worth of running? Like all of those things seemed quite a big deal at the time. And then obviously people get a bit carried away with their ideas. And someone said, no, why would you do 10Ks? Do 100 or do something massive. And what it ended up settling on, someone suggested 24 hours, which I just thought, there's just no way I'm going to run for 24 hours. Someone else said do it kind of like a backyard ultra style, where you do a certain distance every hour on the hour. But because of the weird distance, I thought, like, I can't really choose a distance because it's all just a bit random. I'm not exactly sure what it is because the GPS will be a bit funny. So I ended up settling on 30 minutes on, 30 minutes off for 24 hours, starting at midnight, finishing at the next midnight. So that was the weirdest thing I've ever done. I felt I just was so sleep deprived towards the end of it that I just felt kind of out of my body. Like it was this really weird sensation. I think I did like 57 Ks or something, which if you were to look at a 24-hour period, 57 Ks is just not that much if you were running continuously or even for the majority of it. But because of all the turns, I just really couldn't get that far. And so going through those early hours in the morning, that was really tough. Once the sun came up, I was okay. But this was also, I think it was January or maybe early February, super hot. I think it was like a 30-degree day, and I obviously had to go all day. So I put like wet towels in the freezer. I was having ice blocks, and because I was in lockdown, I couldn't go out and get supplies. So I just had whatever was left in the cupboard or the freezer for my nutrition. Had these random like frozen potatoes that I cooked up halfway through. I was having showers halfway through laps because I had that half an hour gap. And then I remember getting to about 9 or 10 o'clock at night after doing it all day, and I was just dreading the rest period because I just had to sit around and wait for the next thing. Like it wasn't enough time to get anything done, but it was like too long to sit around. So it was a really, really interesting mental battle. Like one of the hardest things I've ever done. But yeah, I do random things like that. I haven't done anything too crazy for a while, but for the next 6 months, I just want to be sensible, kind of consistent. I'm tempted to get a coach just to have someone oversee my training, some of the benefits we talked about before, and just really focus on Tararua for next year.
What distance at Tararua?
50k.
50k. Nice.
Yeah, I'm still a bit traumatized from Bondi to Manly. I just don't think I could do anything that long for a while. So I think 50's long enough to feel like it's a really, really decent challenge, but not too long that I'm just going to end up hating it.
For sure, yeah, I agree. And going back to the trail thing that you were talking about earlier, like it reminded me of your podcast with Lydia recently, because I heard Lydia talking about better lighting. Yeah, like your podcast with Lydia recently, I remember her talking about the 3 types of connection or whatever. I think it was something to do with connection to nature, connection to yourself, and connection to the community, and that's why she runs. And I feel like that was a really good way to put it, because when you told the listeners to think about why you run, like I was trying to think about it as well, and I feel like I resonated with those 3 C's the most. I think I really admire Lydia for her deep thinking. And she's always kind of quite philosophical and thinking about the why. And for me, I think before we, like, obviously I just think about it all the time because I chat to Lydia all the time, but before that, if you'd asked me why I ran, I think it's kind of just like a reflex. It's sort of just like a habit. I don't really know why. I'm just still doing it because I've just always done it and I don't know any different. But when she spoke about that, it's kind of, I think that's really quite clear, and that I resonate with that as well. I think having one or all of those aspects in your runs is just, it really makes it worthwhile. And I think
you can't argue with that, right? Like that is just such a valuable thing to have in our lives, and if running is the thing that allows us to have that, that's super important. And I think as well, something that she highlighted in that episode and that we've talked about quite a lot is not identifying ourselves as runners as our only thing. And I know for both of us, like we work in the running world, our social life is running, we run for our sport and our hobby. Like you could look at us both, we have podcasts about running. You could just be like, okay, you two are runners, like you've got nothing else to offer. Obviously you've got your YouTube stuff and I've got other hobbies, but on the surface, what else do we have? But I think I know both of us have other things, and I think the listeners should think about, what else do you have? Is there something else that you do with your time? Because as soon as that's taken away from us with injury or illness or whatever it is, you can feel quite lost. And you see this happen to runners all the time. If they can't run, they don't know what to do with all their newfound free time. They kind of feel quite lost and not sure what to do with that. But there are so many other sports, there's so many other activities, there's so many other things in life, whether it's a creative pursuit or reading or writing or whatever it is that you can do with your time. And I think making sure that you've got a secondary hobby or a secondary activity, something else that you love just as much, and that maybe links to those three things. Maybe it gives you that social connection, maybe you connect to yourself, maybe you connect to nature without needing to rely on running as your sole purpose. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you do a good job at that anyway, because like, yeah, I always see on your stories like you do unicycling and
I've got it here if you want to have a go.
Lining. I don't want to try. I'm kind of scared of that thing.
It's terrifying.
But it's cool to get those occasional updates from you, because you're like, oh, I did 1.5 rotations, and then like you do a bit more and whatever. What are you up to now?
I think still that. The unicycle is the one
But you started
hobby.
with half a rotation or
it's
something.
so hard. It's one of those things that's like, it's really frustratingly hard, and you've got to be super patient with it. Which makes me enjoy the running even more, because you can just run and not have to think about it too much. So it makes me appreciate that.
For sure, yeah. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good note to end on. But I'm going to copy your podcast and I'm going to ask you what your current favorite shoes are, or like one or two. Because you have a lot.
That's one shoe rack, and then there's another one, and then there's another pile in the room, and then there's more in my... So I know that you've cut down on your shoes recently.
I have. I have less than you now.
I've probably got 12, 20, maybe 30 pairs.
Really?
Currently.
I have like...
Which sounds bad when you say it.
Yeah.
It sounds really bad. I don't buy all of them, which helps.
Yeah.
So thank you to everyone who's given me shoes. But and I used to work in a shoe shop and took a heap of them before I left.
Yeah.
So if I had... Okay, can I do top 3?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Because I wouldn't be able to pick a top one. Yeah.
Like if we just looked at my week right now.
Yeah.
The shoes that you sold me about a year ago.
Yeah.
Saucony Endorphin Speeds.
Yeah.
Probably should update them. They're probably a bit worn out, but I really, really enjoy them. I've had a few little foot things going on previously, and I really like the stiffness of that. I find that feels really nice on my foot.
Yeah.
And it just feels like light and fast and comfy. I've always been a Brooks Adrenaline fan, but I'm starting to move away from them because there's so many more fun shoes that just feel like they give you more back. And the Adrenaline's just always been my safe option, but I think I'm going to move on from that. The Asics Kayano 30, I think, is going to replace the Brooks Adrenaline. Similar kind of category. Sorry, Brooks, if you're listening. I mean, if you're going to give me one, I'll take it, but probably not after this. Asics Kayano feels really good. It's so different to any Kayano I've ever tried on before. I've never actually had a pair, but I've tried them on in the past. And it just is so nice and plush and supportive and stable. I've got kind of weird biomechanics. I've got quite an overpronated left foot, kind of different sides left and right. So I find that gives me a nice amount of stability. So Saucony Endorphin Speed, Asics Kayano. And then I'm just having a look. I think possibly the Hoka Kavu, which is so random.
I used to have one.
It doesn't exist anymore, right?
Ages ago, yeah. I had one ages ago.
The one that I've got, it says not to be sold. It was like a try-on or something. Yeah. And I just got them from where I used to work. But I don't know, there's something about them. I think maybe similar to the Mac potentially, but probably a little bit more stack height. Yeah. Just comfy, light, easy. I don't have to think about it. I think that was something I used to tell people when I worked in the shoe shop. Like, if you put it on and you don't notice anything or don't have to think about it, if it just feels natural, I think that's a good sign. Yeah. Because there's so many people asking, like, how do I know what shoe to buy? Yeah. That would be my number one tip. Yeah, exactly. Because it's so hard. Like, when I get asked what shoe is the best, it's so hard for me to answer. Like, I don't want to go on a long spiel about, like, everything. But
I also don't want to be so vague, but yeah, like I always fall back to as long as you get the category of shoe right,
Yeah.
like it's about comfort and like feeling like as if you're not wearing anything basically. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. The new counter seems pretty good. I've never owned any counter, but like it seems less supportive in terms of arch support, which I think is a good thing. Just because,
Yeah.
yeah, in the past I feel like shoes were trending towards too much arch support in a way, and like majority of the population don't need it, in my opinion. Like even
Yeah.
if you pronate a fair amount, if you're not really getting too much or any pain from it, then you just don't need it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I pronate a fair amount, to be honest. Like I look at me running, and you can definitely see me pronating or rolling in, but I don't really wear any stability shoes. So yeah, I think the counter is trending towards a better direction, which is nice.
Yeah,
For
I
sure.
agree.
Yeah. Cool. Well, on that note, the sun has set
Yeah.
and
Time
it's
to
getting
go.
dark. So
Oh, I'm sad. I was enjoying that.
yeah,
good.
I feel like even though we were quite jumpy with topics sometimes, like we could go on forever.
We could.
Yeah.
We can do a part 2. You
Yeah.
can come back on ours and we can rotate.
I'd love to. I still want to do a podcast with well, yeah, you and Lydia about shoes one day.
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether to do it on mine or yours or both.
Yeah,
but
I mean, we could record it and put it up on
Yeah.
both, and yeah.
potentially, yeah. Because I know Lydia loves talking about shoes as well, so
Yeah.
she would love that.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
I'd be so keen.
Yeah, like if I were to get her on
Shoes.
mine, then we'd definitely talk shoes for
Yes.
most of it, I reckon.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, but
Cool.
we'll definitely do a part 2 at some point.
Yes, very keen.
And if you guys haven't listened to The Strongest Ride yet, for some reason, please go check it
For
out.
some reason.
Because yeah, it's a really good podcast. I feel like it's the perfect in between of like getting to know the guests well and also getting some pretty valuable information. So yeah, obviously I take a lot of inspiration from that. So it'll be a similar kind of vibe, hopefully, and yeah, you'll like it. So definitely recommend. And I guess to finish off, wrap up with your socials. Where can people find you?
Oh yeah, well, we are at Strongest Stride on Instagram. That's where all the podcast stuff goes, and then I am at Sophie Lane. So both of them are pretty easy, no underscores or dots or anything in there. So got in nice and early.
Yeah.
But yeah, follow along, and thank you so much, Soda, for having me on. I'm honoured to be a guest. It's really exciting. I've enjoyed it a lot
Yeah.
more. It's nice just to sit back, relax, and get asked the questions, not have to plan anything. So thank you so much.
That's true. Thank you so much.